Y'all, when that young man took off his only winter coat and wrapped it around my shoulders, he had absolutely no idea he was about to become the richest single father in Chicago. Honey, I was sitting there on that freezing bench outside Union Station, dressed in rags I'd borrowed from Goodwill. And sweetie, let me tell you something. Nobody, and I mean nobody, had shown me kindness like that in over 40 years of running Madison Industries. The snow was coming down something fierce that December morning, and I could feel every icy flake cutting through those threadbare clothes like tiny knives. Y'all, I'd been testing people for 3 solid weeks, sitting on different corners, different benches, watching how folks treated what they thought was just another homeless old lady. My own board members walked right past me outside our headquarters building. My own neighbors from Lake Forest drove by without even slowing down. But this man, this beautiful soul carrying a little girl's pink backpack, he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me shivering. "Ma'am," he said, and honey, his voice was so gentle it nearly broke my heart right there. "You gonna freeze to death out here." Before I could even respond, sweetie, he was shrugging out of that navy blue coat, and y'all, I could see it was his only coat because he didn't have anything underneath but a thin work shirt from what looked like a restaurant uniform. The man was literally giving me the coat off his back, and I could tell from the way he moved so carefully, this wasn't some designer jacket he could replace tomorrow. This was his one good coat for the Chicago winter. "Son, you don't need to," I started, but he was already wrapping it around my shoulders with the tenderness of someone tucking in their own grandmother. The fabric still held his warmth, and I swear I could smell the faint scent of cooking grease and dedication. This man worked for every dollar he had. "My little girl Emma would never forgive me if I left you out here like this," he said with this smile that lit up his whole face despite the exhaustion I could see around his eyes. "She's always telling me we gotta help people who need help." Then he pulled a crumpled $5 bill from his pocket. Y'all, it might have been his last $5, and pressed it into my hand. "There's a Dunkin' Donuts right around the corner. Get yourself something hot to drink, okay?" Before I tell you what happened next, and honey, this part is going to absolutely shock you. If you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. You know I get so excited when I see y'all in the comments. Speaking of which, what state are you calling home right now? Drop it down below. And sweetie, tell me, have you ever met someone whose kindness just completely changed your perspective on everything? Because what this man did was about to transform both our lives in ways neither of us could imagine. Now, let me tell you what I discovered about this beautiful soul, because honey, his story was about to break my heart wide open. I watched him walk away in just that thin work shirt, his breath making little clouds in the freezing air. And sweetie, something inside my chest just cracked open like an egg. Here I was, Eleanor Madison, worth $3.2 billion, and I just met the first genuinely good person I'd encountered in decades. Not someone who wanted something from me, not someone who recognized my name from Forbes magazine, just a man who saw another human being in need and gave everything he had to help. Y'all, I couldn't let him disappear into that Chicago morning without knowing his story. So I gathered up my borrowed rags and that precious coat, which I was not giving up, honey, and I followed him at a distance. I watched him duck into a little diner called Mickey's, where the windows were all fogged up from the warmth inside. Through the glass, I could see him tying on an apron, and the way the other workers greeted him told me everything I needed to know. This was a man people respected, someone who showed up every day and worked his tail off. I spent the next hour in that Dunkin' Donuts he'd mentioned, nursing a coffee and making phone calls. Sweetie, when you've got the resources I have, you can find out anything about anybody. And what I learned about Marcus Thompson nearly brought me to my knees right there in that donut shop. Marcus was 28 years old, working double shifts at Mickey's Diner to support his 6-year-old daughter Emma after her mama died in a car accident 2 years ago. Y'all, this man was working breakfast shift at 5 a.m., then running home to get Emma ready for school, then coming back for the dinner shift until midnight, 7 days a week. He'd given up his dreams of becoming a teacher, had been just 1 semester away from his education degree because he couldn't afford childcare and college at the same time. But honey, that wasn't even the part that made my heart ache. What really got to me was learning that Marcus had been evicted from their apartment 3 days ago. They were staying at a friend's place, sleeping on a couch, and he was saving every penny to try to get a security deposit together for a new place. That $5 he gave me, sweetie, that might have been Emma's lunch money for the next 2 days. I sat there in that Dunkin' Donuts wearing a coat given to me by a man who had nothing, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in 40 years of business dealings. Pure, honest shame. When was the last time I helped someone without expecting something in return? When had I ever sacrificed my own comfort for a stranger? Y'all, I built an empire, but somehow along the way, I'd forgotten how to be human. That's when I made a decision that was about to change everything. I wasn't going to reveal who I was just yet. No, honey. I had a much better plan brewing in my mind. I was going to find out just how good this man really was. And if he passed my test, well, let's just say Emma Thompson was about to get the best Christmas present any little girl ever received. I spent the rest of that week watching Marcus from a distance, learning his routine, understanding his struggles. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., he'd walk 10 blocks to Mickey's Diner because he couldn't afford to fix his car. Every evening after his shift, he'd stop at the public library to help Emma with her homework at one of those little tables because their friend's apartment was too noisy. On Saturdays, his only day off, he'd take Emma to Lincoln Park to feed the ducks with stale bread he got free from the diner. Sweetie, watching this man parent his daughter with such devotion while working himself to the bone just to keep them afloat reminded me of my own daddy, who died when I was Emma's age. My daddy had worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table, and seeing Marcus do the same thing for his little girl brought back memories I buried under decades of board meetings and profit margins. But y'all, it wasn't just Marcus's work ethic that impressed me. It was his character. I watched him find a wallet on the sidewalk and spend 20 minutes tracking down the owner instead of keeping the cash inside. I saw him stay late at the diner unpaid to help train a new employee who was struggling. When an elderly customer couldn't afford her breakfast, Marcus quietly paid for it out of his own tips. This man was pure gold, honey, and he didn't even know it. By the end of that first week, I'd made up my mind. I was going to test Marcus one more time, but this test was going to be different. This wasn't about seeing if he'd help a stranger. I already knew he would. This was about finding out what kind of man he really was when he thought nobody was watching, when there was something real at stake. I had my assistant Sarah, who'd been with me for 15 years and was one of the few people who knew about my little homeless disguise experiment, set up a very special situation. We rented a small apartment 2 blocks from Mickey's Diner, and Sarah spread the word through the neighborhood that an elderly woman was looking for someone trustworthy to help her with grocery shopping and light housework, paying $15 an hour in cash. Y'all, I knew Marcus would hear about this opportunity because Sarah made sure to mention it to the right people. And sure enough, 3 days later, there was a knock on that apartment door. When I opened it, still dressed in my Goodwill clothes, but now clean and presentable, Marcus's face lit up with recognition. "Hey, you're the lady from the train station. Are you doing okay? I was worried about you when I didn't see you there anymore." Sweetie, this man hadn't seen me for over a week, but he'd been worried about me. He remembered one random homeless woman out of all the people he encountered every day, and he'd actually been concerned for my well-being. Y'all, I had to turn away and pretend to cough because I could feel tears starting to sting my eyes. "I'm doing much better, thanks to your kindness," I told him. And honey, that was the absolute truth. "I heard through the grapevine that you might be interested in helping an old lady with some household tasks." "Yes, ma'am," he said immediately. "I've got about 4 hours between shifts most days, and weekends are pretty open except for time with my daughter. I'd be honored to help you out." And so began the most enlightening month of my entire 70 years on this earth. 3 times a week, Marcus would come to that little apartment and help Dorothy, that's the name I'd given myself, with everything from grocery shopping to fixing a loose cabinet door. But sweetie, what I really got was a front row seat to watch the most genuinely good man I'd ever encountered. Marcus never just did the bare minimum. If I asked him to help me carry groceries, he'd also organize my pantry and make sure I had easy access to everything. When I mentioned that my back hurt, he spent his own money on a small heating pad and showed me exercises his daughter's physical therapist had taught him after Emma sprained her ankle. Y'all, this man was taking care of me like I was his own grandmother. But honey, the real test came on a rainy Thursday afternoon in late December. I had strategically left $500 in cash on the kitchen counter, money that was clearly visible and easily accessible. I pretended to take a nap in the bedroom while Marcus cleaned the living room, giving him every opportunity to pocket that money with no one the wiser. But instead, sweetie, you know what that beautiful man did? He came and gently woke me up. "Miss Dorothy, I don't want you to worry, but there's a lot of cash sitting out on your kitchen counter. You might want to put that somewhere safe. There's all kinds of people in this neighborhood, and you don't want to take any chances." Y'all, I could barely keep the tremor out of my voice when I thanked him. Here was a man who was sleeping on a friend's couch, working 2 shifts a day just to survive, and he was protecting my money instead of taking what could have solved all his problems. But the moment that absolutely sealed the deal, the moment I knew Marcus Thompson was getting everything I had to give, came the following weekend when he brought Emma to meet me. "Miss Dorothy, I hope you don't mind, but my babysitter canceled, and I didn't want to leave you hanging. This is my daughter, Emma. Emma, this is Miss Dorothy, the nice lady I told you about." Y'all, when that little girl walked into my temporary apartment with her bright pink backpack and her daddy's same gentle smile, something in my heart just exploded with joy. She was the most precious thing I had ever seen. Gap-toothed grin, pigtail slightly crooked like her daddy had done his best but wasn't quite sure about girl hair, and wearing a dress that was obviously from a thrift store but clean and pressed with so much care. "Hi, Miss Dorothy," Emma said with the kind of confidence that only comes from being truly loved. "Daddy says you make the best chocolate chip cookies in Chicago." Now, honey, I hadn't actually made any cookies. Sarah had been bringing them from a bakery, but I couldn't let this precious child down. "Well, sweetie, how about we make some fresh ones right now? I could use a good helper." For the next 2 hours, I watched Marcus interact with his daughter, and y'all, it was like watching pure love in action. The way he patiently helped her measure ingredients, how he boosted her up so she could reach the mixing bowl, the way he celebrated when she successfully cracked an egg without getting shells in the batter. Y'all, this man was raising his daughter with the kind of devotion I only read about in books. But sweetie, what really got to me was watching Emma with Marcus. This little girl absolutely adored her daddy. She hung on his every word, mimicked his gentle mannerisms, and the way she looked at him like he hung the moon and stars just for her told me everything I needed to know about what kind of father he was. "Daddy works really hard," Emma told me while we waited for the cookies to bake, completely unprompted. "He gets up really early and comes home really late, but he always reads me a story before bed, even when he's super tired." does he now?" I asked, sneaking a glance at Marcus, who was washing dishes and pretending he couldn't hear us. "Uh-huh, and he makes funny voices for all the characters. The dragon sounds like this," and she proceeded to do this ridiculous growling voice that had Marcus and me both cracking up. "Daddy, show Miss Dorothy your dragon voice." Y'all, watching this grown man get down on his knees and growl like a dragon to make his daughter giggle was the moment I knew for certain that Marcus Thompson deserved everything good this world had to offer. This was a man who understood what really mattered in life, who could find joy and create magic even when he was barely scraping by. Now, after they left that evening, Emma clutching a bag of cookies and chattering about how Miss Dorothy is the nicest old lady in the whole world, I sat alone in that little apartment and made the biggest decision of my life. It was time to change everything. The next morning, I had Sarah arrange a meeting with my lawyers, my accountants, and my most trusted advisors. Y'all, when I walked into that conference room at Madison Industries headquarters, dressed in my regular clothes for the first time in weeks, the expressions on everyone's faces were priceless. "Eleanor, where have you been?" demanded Robert Peterson, my CFO. "We've been trying to reach you for weeks. The Henderson acquisition is stalled, the quarterly reports need your approval, and the board is asking questions." "The board can wait," I said, settling into my chair with a satisfaction I hadn't felt in years. "We're about to make some changes around here. Big changes." I spent the next 3 hours outlining my plan, and honey, by the time I was finished, there wasn't a dry eye in that room. Not because they were sad, but because they finally understood what their boss had been missing all these years, the simple joy of human connection and the profound satisfaction that comes from lifting others up. Here's what I decided to do for Marcus Thompson, sweetie, and y'all are gonna love this. First, I was gonna pay off his debts, all of them. The medical bills from Emma's mama's accident, the student loans from his incomplete degree, the credit card debt he'd accumulated just trying to keep Emma fed and clothed. Gone. Wiped clean. Second, I was going to set up a trust fund for Emma's education, not just college, but the best private schools, tutoring if she needed it, extracurricular activities, everything a little girl deserved to explore her dreams. Third, and this is where it gets really good, I was going to offer Marcus a position at Madison Industries. Not some token job, but a real opportunity to use his natural leadership skills and his genuine care for people. I was creating a new department, community outreach and employee wellness, and Marcus was going to run it. But honey, the crown jewel of my plan was the house. I owned a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Lincoln Park, the same neighborhood where Marcus took Emma to feed the ducks, and I was going to deed it over to them, free and clear. No mortgage, no rent, just a home where a good man could raise his daughter in safety and comfort. The only question now was how to reveal all of this without giving the poor man a heart attack. I decided to start small. That Thursday, when Marcus came for his regular visit to help Miss Dorothy, I had a little surprise waiting for him. "Marcus, honey, I've been thinking," I said while he fixed a squeaky door hinge. "You've been so kind to me these past few weeks, and I know you're working so hard to take care of Emma. I want to do something for you." He immediately started shaking his head. "Miss Dorothy, you don't need to do anything. You're already paying me fairly. And honestly, spending time with you has been one of the best parts of my week. You remind me of my grandmother." Y'all, this man was trying to talk me out of helping him. Could he be any more perfect? "Well, too bad, because I've already done it," I said with a smile. "There's an envelope on the kitchen table with your name on it." Marcus looked confused but walked over to the table. Inside that envelope was a cashier's check for $5,000 and a note that read,
for Emma's Christmas presents and a security deposit on a new apartment. You've given me more kindness than money could ever repay." Sweetie, when Marcus saw that check, his legs just gave out. He sat down hard in one of my kitchen chairs and stared at it like it might disappear. "Miss Dorothy, I can't accept this," he said, but his voice was shaking and I could see tears starting to pool in his eyes. This is too much. You barely know me." "Son, I know you better than you think," I told him. And honey, that was truer than he could ever imagine. "I know you're a good man raising a precious little girl all by yourself. I know you work harder than anyone should have to work just to get by. And I know that if our situations were reversed, you'd do the same thing for me without thinking twice about it." "But where did you get this kind of money?" he asked, still staring at the check. "Let's just say I've been blessed in my life, and now I want to pass some of those blessings on to you and Emma." Y'all, watching Marcus try to process this unexpected windfall was like watching someone discover they could fly. The relief, the gratitude, the sheer overwhelming emotion of realizing that his financial struggles were about to get a whole lot easier. It was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. "Emma's gonna have the best Christmas ever," he whispered. And then he did something that nearly undid me completely. He got up from that chair and walked over to where I was sitting and hugged me like he was his own family. "Thank you," he said into my shoulder, and honey, I could feel his whole body shaking with emotion. Oh, honey, if only he knew. But that was just the beginning. Over the next week, I had Sarah orchestrate a series of coincidences that were going to change Marcus's life forever. First, he got a call from the financial aid office at Chicago State University. "Mr. Thompson, we've reviewed your file and it appears you're eligible for a special scholarship program for single parents. If you're interested in completing your education degree, we can cover your tuition and provide a stipend for living expenses." When Marcus called to tell me about this miracle, I could barely contain my excitement. "That's wonderful, son. You should absolutely take advantage of that opportunity." "But Miss Dorothy, I can't leave Emma or quit my job. We need the income from the diner." "Marcus, honey, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. Something tells me things are going to work out just fine." 2 days later, he got another call, this one from a property management company. "Mr. Thompson, we have a client who owns a beautiful house in Lincoln Park. She's looking for a responsible tenant to rent it for an incredibly reasonable price. Are you interested in taking a look?" Y'all, when Marcus told me about the house, my house, and described it exactly as I knew he would, I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing with pure joy. "It sounds almost too good to be true," he said. 4 bedrooms, a yard for Emma, walking distance to great schools. "But Miss Dorothy, it's in Lincoln Park. Even with your generous gift, I don't know if I can afford to live in that neighborhood." "Why don't you go look at it?" I suggested. The following Saturday, Marcus and Emma went to see the house, and honey, I was there waiting for them, not as Miss Dorothy, but as myself, Eleanor Madison, dressed in my best suit and ready to change their lives forever. When Marcus knocked on the front door of that Lincoln Park Colonial, he was expecting to meet a property manager. What he got instead was the shock of his lifetime. "Miss Dorothy," he said when I opened the door, his eyes wide with confusion. "What are you doing here? And you look different." "Hello, Marcus," I said with the biggest smile I'd felt on my face in decades. "I think we need to talk. Both of you. Come on in." Emma, bless her heart, bounced right into the house like she owned the place. "Daddy, this house is huge. Can we live here? Please, please, please." "Emma, sweetie, let's not get ahead of ourselves," Marcus said, but I could see him taking in the hardwood floors, the big windows, the kind of space every parent dreams of giving their child. Actually, Emma, this house could be yours if you want it. And y'all, the look Marcus gave me was pure panic. Miss Dorothy, I don't understand what's happening here. Sit down, both of you, I said, gesturing to the comfortable living room furniture I'd had Sarah arrange. I have a story to tell you, and it's going to sound absolutely crazy, but every word of it is true. For the next hour, I told Marcus and Emma everything. Who I really was, why I'd been dressed as a homeless woman that day at Union Station, how I'd been testing people's kindness, and how Marcus had not only passed every test, but had restored my faith in human goodness. You're telling me, he said slowly, that you're Eleanor Madison, as in Madison Industries, as in billionaire Eleanor Madison? That's right, honey. And you've been pretending to be a poor old lady to test whether people are good or not? Well, when you put it like that, it sounds a little crazy, but yes. Emma, who had been listening with the kind of intense concentration only 6-year-olds possess, suddenly piped up. So you're like a fairy godmother, but instead of magic, you have lots and lots of money. Y'all, out of the mouths of babes, something like that, sweetheart.
Marcus was still trying to process everything. The money you gave me, the scholarship, this house. All me, I confirmed. And Marcus, that's just the beginning. I spent the next 30 minutes outlining everything I wanted to do for them. The debt forgiveness, Emma's education fund, the job offer at Madison Industries, and yes, the house they were sitting in, which would be theirs with no strings attached. By the time I finished talking, Marcus was crying openly, and Emma was bouncing on the couch with excitement about having her own room and a yard for a puppy. Why, Marcus asked through his tears. Why us? Why me? Because, son, in 40 years of building my business, I forgot what really mattered. You reminded me that kindness isn't just something nice to do when it's convenient. It's a way of living, a choice you make every single day, regardless of your circumstances. You gave me your coat when you were colder than I was. You gave me $5 when you probably needed it more than I did. You've spent a month taking care of an old lady you barely knew, not because you expected anything in return, but because that's who you are. I took Emma's small hand in one of mine and Marcus's work-rough hand in the other. You two gave me something I'd lost somewhere along the way. You gave me back my heart. This isn't charity, Marcus. This is gratitude. Sweetie, what happened next was the most beautiful chaos you ever did see. Emma started running through the house, claiming bedrooms and planning where her toys would go. Marcus alternated between thanking me and insisting it was all too much. And me, honey, I sat in that living room and felt more complete than I had in decades. But y'all, the story doesn't end there. Because what I discovered over the following months was that helping Marcus and Emma didn't just change their lives, it completely transformed mine. Marcus threw himself into his new role at Madison Industries with the same dedication he'd shown at Mickey's Diner, but now he was using those skills to create programs that actually helped people. He started a daycare center for employees' children, organized financial literacy workshops for single parents, and created a mentorship program that paired senior employees with young workers just starting their careers. Watching Marcus flourish in an environment where his natural compassion was valued and rewarded reminded me why I'd started Madison Industries in the first place. Not just to make money, but to create opportunities for people to build better lives. Emma started at the Lincoln Park Elementary School and absolutely thrived. Her teacher called Marcus after the first week to tell him that Emma was the most
empathetic, helpful child she taught in 20 years of education. Whatever you're doing at home, Mr. Thompson, keep doing it. Emma is going to change the world someday. And me? Well, honey, I started spending less time in boardrooms and more time with people. I established the Marcus Thompson Foundation for single parents, providing scholarships, housing assistance, and childcare support for families struggling to make ends meet. I began visiting schools, community centers, and yes, sometimes I still put on those old Goodwill clothes and sit on park benches just to remind myself what the world looks like from the bottom up. But the most wonderful change of all was that I gained a family. Marcus and Emma didn't just accept my help, they welcomed me into their lives with the same generous hearts that had attracted me to them in the first place. Sunday dinners at the Lincoln Park house became the highlight of my week. Helping Emma with her homework, teaching her to play chess, watching Marcus coach her Little League team. These became the moments I treasured most. Y'all, I learned something important during those months. True wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in the connections you make, the lives you touch, and the love you give and receive. For 40 years, I'd been rich in money, but poor in everything that actually matters. 6 months after that snowy day at Union Station, I threw a party, not for a business deal or a charity gala, but to celebrate the completion of Marcus's education degree. He'd finished his coursework while working at Madison Industries and was officially a certified teacher, though he decided to stay with the company to continue building programs that helped working families. The party was held at the Lincoln Park house, Emma and Marcus's house, and it was filled with all the people who had become important to us over those months. Marcus's coworkers from the diner who couldn't believe their buddy was now running programs for a Fortune 500 company. Emma's classmates and their parents who had quickly discovered that playdates at the Thompson house always included the best snacks and the most interesting stories from Grandma Eleanor. Even some of my old board members showed up. And honey, seeing those stuffed shirts trying to make conversation with 6-year-olds was better than any entertainment I could have hired. But the moment that made it all perfect was when Emma, who had been practicing for weeks, stood up in front of everyone to make a toast. I want to thank Grandma Eleanor for giving my daddy the best job ever, and for giving us the best house ever, and for teaching me that sometimes angels look like regular people, but you can tell who they are because they make your heart feel warm and happy. Y'all, there wasn't a dry eye in that house. Marcus was crying. I was crying. Even some of those tough board members were wiping their eyes. But Emma wasn't done. And I want to thank my daddy for being the best daddy in the whole world and for teaching me that helping people is the most important thing we can do, even when we don't have very much to give. That little girl had learned the lesson that it took me 70 years to understand. The size of your gift matters less than the size of your heart. As I looked around that room, at Marcus laughing with his old coworkers, at Emma showing off her new toys to her friends, at all the people whose lives had been touched by the simple act of one man giving his coat to a stranger, I realized something profound. I'd started this journey thinking I was testing other people's character. What I'd actually been doing was discovering my own. That night, after the last guest had gone home and we'd finished cleaning up, Marcus, Emma, and I sat on the front porch swing that had come with the house. Emma was curled up between us, half asleep, but fighting to stay awake because she didn't want the perfect day to end. "Eleanor," Marcus said quietly, "I need you to know something. That day at the train station, when I gave you my coat, I did it because my mama raised me to help people when I could, and because Emma was always watching how I treated others. I know that, son. That's why all of this happened. But what I need you to understand is that you gave me something more valuable than money or this house or even the job. You gave me hope. For 2 years after Emma's mama died, I felt like I was drowning, like no matter how hard I worked or how much I loved Emma, it was never going to be enough. You showed me that good things can still happen to good people, that kindness gets rewarded even when you don't expect it. Emma stirred in her sleepy state and mumbled, "Grandma Eleanor, will you tell me the story about the dragon and the princess?" "Which dragon story, sweetheart? The one where the dragon turns out to be nice and everyone lives happily ever after?"
Y'all, as I started telling Emma her favorite fairy tale, I realized that we were living in our own version of happily ever after. Not because everything was perfect, but because we'd found each other, and we'd chosen to love and take care of each other like family should. The last thing I want to tell you, honey, is what happened 1 year later on the anniversary of that snowy day at Union Station. Marcus surprised me by suggesting we go back to that same bench where we'd first met. But this time, we brought blankets and hot chocolate and bags full of coats and gloves to give away to anyone who needed them. As we sat there together, Marcus, Emma, and me, watching people hurry past in the December cold, Emma spotted an elderly man sitting alone on another bench, shivering in clothes that had seen better days. Without hesitation, she unwrapped herself from her warm coat and walked over to him. "Sir, are you cold? Would you like my coat? My grandma Eleanor says sharing is the most important thing we can do." Y'all, watching that precious little girl give her coat to a stranger, just like her daddy had done a year earlier, was the moment I knew for certain that the Thompson family legacy of kindness was going to continue for generations to come. The elderly man accepted Emma's coat with tears in his eyes, and as Marcus wrapped his arms around his daughter to keep her warm, he looked at me with a smile that could have powered all of Chicago. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. "Thank you," I mouthed back. Because that's the beautiful thing about kindness, sweetie. It's never really about who's giving and who's receiving. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together, that every single person you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about, and that sometimes the smallest gestures can change someone's entire world. That snowy night at Union Station, a single father gave his coat to a stranger and changed his destiny. But honey, what he really did was remind a lonely billionaire how to be human again. And in return, he gained not just financial security, but a family that will love him and Emma for the rest of their lives. Y'all, I'm Eleanor Madison, but these days, the title I'm proudest of is Grandma Eleanor, because I learned that true wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you give away. And it's the people you choose to love along the way. If you love this story, drop a comment below and tell me about a time when someone's unexpected kindness changed your day, your week, or your whole life. And remember, sweetie, you never know when you might be someone's miracle. Sometimes all it takes is giving your coat to a stranger on a cold winter night.